Eventide Entertainment presents The Drive-In, hosted by Aaron Lopez. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us again on The Drive-In. This week, we are looking at the newest film directed by George Clooney, Suburbicon. I was able to sit down with a friend of mine, Mr. Chris Burnside, a fellow podcaster, and a fellow movie lover, and I was able to discover some new things about the film that I had not seen through his viewpoint of studying film. It was a great conversation. I'm really excited for you all to hear it. As you listen to the conversation, remember that you can be part of every conversation that we have here on the Drive-In by reaching out to us either through our email, drivein@gmail.com, or you can reach us on Twitter @drivein-eventide. All right, so before we jump into the review, we do have a new segment on the Drive-In titled Movie Drink Pairings. Now, if you go and see the movie at one of the Ohio theaters, you do have the opportunity to grab a drink, maybe a beer or a glass of wine, but if you are seeing this movie in a more suitable venue, I recommend grabbing an old-fashioned. Get yourself a nice cocktail glass, some bourbon, and craft yourself an old-fashioned. It fits very much to the 1950s and the time period, the mood, the setting, just everything rolls around in a nice old-fashioned way. So grab an old-fashioned and enjoy the movie. All right, so without any further ado, here's the review of Suburbicon. All right, so I'm sitting here with Chris Burnside. We are ready to start talking about Suburbicon, the George Clooney directed film. I think it was his directorial debut.
It may have been, yeah.
I'm not quite sure, but regardless, we went and saw this movie this week, actually opening night. And first off, welcome, Chris. Thanks for coming in today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Chris, just to give everybody who's listening a little bit of insight into your love of movies, tell us your relationship with movies over your life.
Well, I've loved movies basically as long as I can remember. I remember going to see Snow White and the Seven Dwarves at the drive-in and being terrified by the Wicked Queen. And I stopped having nightmares about her about 10 years ago. But I have, since being a movie fan for a long time, I studied screenwriting at the graduate level. And so now I look at movies a little bit differently,
awesome.
like a writer.
What would you say your favorite movie? Let's see, I know people ask me that question and it's so broad.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say your favorite movie since you studied movies.
That would probably be Primer.
Okay.
Which is an indie film that is very mind-bending.
All right. Awesome. All right, so we had 6 trailers that came out before Suburbicon. We'll look at each of them. Bastards, Daddy's Home 2, Downsizing, Molly's Game, Roman J. Israel, Esquire, and Winchester. Which of those stood out to you as one that you're really excited to go see?
I definitely thought that Molly's Game looked really interesting and very different. So I think that's probably the one I'm most excited for, probably. But the Roman J.
Israel, Esquire.
Yes, that one with Denzel, that also looked pretty interesting.
Yeah, to me that one, the Denzel, it's Denzel doing Denzel, just in a different way. He does it very well, and no one questions when he's going to do those kind of movies. But it definitely looked like a new approach to his style.
Yeah.
I'm excited for Downsizing. Downsizing, basic rundown of that movie is it's an overpopulation movie, but it's not necessarily a science fiction or a dramatic movie. It's a comedy in which people can actually get downsized and become smaller versions of themselves to help with the food shortages and the spaces that are needed. So that's a Matt Damon movie. Also, But Kristen Wiig and a couple others that looked pretty funny. A new idea. I'm excited. That comes out the end of December.
Yeah, I like. It seems very original, and one of the things, like, if you've been even just a movie fan for a long time, let alone studying it, one of the things that you notice is that so many of these movies are just the same formula over and over, and I just like ones that are not.
Yeah, it's and that's something that we'll talk about with Suburbicon when we get further down there. That there's a lot of times that you'll see a movie and you're like, oh, that didn't that happen in another movie I've seen, or at least it's maybe a convention that is utilized a lot. So it's neat when you have a new, fresh approach to something.
Yeah, agreed.
Daddy's Home 2. I saw this one again, same trailer from Geostorm. So, I think the first one was funny. Am I going to see it in theaters? Maybe not, but I'll go and see it for a good laugh. And Bastards to me looked like I had to actually think about it, but you get Owen Wilson and what's his name?
Ed Helms.
Ed Helms. And I was thinking, oh, it's Hall Pass. No, it's not Hall Pass because Ed Helms wasn't in Hall Pass. That was I can't even think of his name now. I'll figure it out. But yeah, it was one of those things where it's like, oh, this is Hall Pass, but he's looking for his family instead of looking for his father instead of getting a Hall Pass from his relationship. But
yeah, there were two movies in a row, or two trailers in a row with two dudes with daddy issues, and they were comedies.
Yeah,
it was like, okay, that's fine, I get it.
Jason Sudeikis.
There you go.
Jason Sudeikis, Ed Helms. They almost could be twins. But yeah, Molly's Game looked really cool. Molly's Game being pretty much a biographical or based on a true story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jessica Chastain was in the lead.
Yeah, it was. I wasn't sure what to expect with that. I'm realizing now that I missed one of them because I didn't even write it down. The Daniel Day-Lewis film.
Oh right, yeah, the Paul Thomas Anderson movie.
Yes, we looked at each other when we saw this, and I was like, I'm sure Daniel Day-Lewis is going to win another Oscar, but I don't think I could see this movie. It looked too artistic for me. Like it looked good, but I don't think I would understand any of it. So I can't. I think it was about an artist. We'll go back and we'll find that one later. But so 7 trailers. Sorry about that, guys. 7 trailers. Again for the second week in a row. So definitely some good things to come out in the next few months. Definitely some stinkers in there as well. But hopefully we give you enough information on the drive-in to decide if you want to go out and see them. All right, so let's get to Suburbicon. That's why we're here today. So Suburbicon is, like we said earlier, directed by George Clooney. The writing credits go to the Coen brothers, but also George Clooney and Grant Heslov as well. It starred Matt Damon and Julianne Moore, as well as Noah Jupe as the newcomer, the little son. And then we also saw a little bit of Oscar Isaac in there as well. So, spoiler-free summary is pretty short and sweet. It's a home invasion that rattles a quiet family town. We get a little bit of 1950s setting here, and it's pretty short and sweet as far as it, without giving you guys too much. If you like Coen brother movies, you may want to go check this one out. If you're not a Coen brother fan, this may not be your style of movie. So there's your quick little summary. If you want to go out and check the movie out, we recommend it, but we think that we're going to get into some spoilers during this show. So we'll give you an opportunity to pause. All right, now we are with only those that want to see the true fleshed out discussion of Suburbicon. So let's get right down to the meat of it. Chris, what did you think of Suburbicon?
So it was, as you said, it was very Coen. It was a dark comedy with normal people engaging in getting kind of wrapped up in crime, but very normal people that have no idea how to actually be criminals getting caught up in it. Even the actual criminals not really being criminals. Mm-hmm. And that's their bread and butter. That's exactly what they've always done. And so it's very Coen. So I don't know that it broke new ground necessarily, because that's kind of their formula. It feels like they maybe just had this like in a desk drawer and we're like, oh yeah, we got this one too.
Yeah.
But I did think it was very different from other movies that are not Coen films.
Yeah, that's something that I noticed, and I didn't notice it until after on the drive home. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this is kind of similar to Fargo, not setting wise, but you have a man who utilizes his wife in order to get money, and there's Fargo, and you have thugs who don't necessarily know what they're doing, and although they seem like they do, and they make things difficult, and you have someone stick their nose where they shouldn't, and they end up dying from it. So you get a lot of those conventions that are utilized. But again, I didn't notice that until after the fact, so the movie did a decent enough job to seem fresh, and I think that unless you are reviewing or analyzing the movie, you're not going to really pick out all of those details as much. So, I completely agree. Very, very Coen in all aspects. You get a little bit of violence. Well, let's be honest, a lot of violence.
Yes.
A lot of violence that sometimes feels a little bit excess, but it is satirical. It's never just gruesome to gross you out or to blood for blood's sake. It has some satire to it, and it has that Coen filter over it, which actually I found out by doing a little bit of research that the version we saw was not necessarily the Coen final script. Clooney and Heslov they went into it and had some rewrites. So all the Coens were given a credit. It may not have been their final script that we saw.
Interesting.
So you could tell though that they had dusted themselves all over it so that it felt Coen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did, and you're right. It was one thing that they're good at in their movies is sudden extreme violence.
Yes.
It kind of takes you by surprise, and you did not realize that it was going to be so violent so quickly. But this one, some of their films, it's like with Fargo, there are moments where it's funny, but there's also moments where it's sort of horrific. And it depends on which film of theirs that you're looking at that they kind of get that. But violence in film is often like that, where this one, something horribly gruesome would happen, and we were just roaring with laughter. Most of the other people in the theater were too, but we, our little group could not stop ourselves from laughing at certain points. But then if you had seen that exact same scene in a different framing in terms of like an action film, it would have been thrilling but not funny. Or in a horror film, they could have played some of those same scenes and it would have been ghastly. So it's really interesting how they make this extreme violence really, really funny.
One that comes to mind is the chloroform scene around the table.
Yes.
That one wasn't funny. That one was very disturbing, and it was kind of uncomfortable to see. But then you see later on, twitching bodies, and you're laughing just because of the setup around it. So they're able to utilize both forms and create a setting that makes you feel a certain way. I want to go back and kind of revise something we said earlier. It is not Clooney's directorial debut. And I'm embarrassed that I didn't remember this, but Good Night and Confessions of a Dangerous Mind was his technical debut. I'm going to say Good Night and Good Luck is where he broke out into directing, but he's also directed Leatherheads, The Ides of March, and The Monuments Men.
Okay.
So he has directed quite a few, but all of them have that same core group of people around them. Mm-hmm. So here's another, as in Suburbicon, here's another film where Clooney goes to his buddies and they perform. They deliver pretty well. Let's go into the racial element of the film. Right in the first few minutes, they're getting a advertisement, some marketing for people to come and live in Suburbicon, and you notice that the families are all white, and they talk about a family from Mississippi even who is white, and you immediately know that race is a part of this. But in the first 10 minutes, you even get that solidified even more. What did you make of this portrayal of race, and more specifically looking at the two families? Because that's kind of where our story splits. We have one family, the black family, and the white family living next door to each other. What did you make of this element?
So I think this is where a lot of people are divided, or maybe not even divided, but kind of against the film. This seems to be the sticking point for a lot of the reviews that were negative on the film. I kind of look at I think they were the Myers.
Yes.
I kind of look at their storyline as Suburbicon B, almost like it was its own movie. Like it very rarely, only very tangentially did it ever intersect what was going on in the main storyline. And it felt like that movie was trying to tell us about, I mean, obviously it was trying to talk to us about race and trying to talk to us about segregation and racism and that sort of thing. But it felt like overall that movie was trying to talk to us about privilege and what it's like to live in that kind of bubble and what Suburbicon really is as a community, what it represents in the larger scale. But then the rest of the film had no interest in that and honestly didn't even need to be set in a place like Suburbicon. It could have happened anywhere and been totally fine.
Yeah.
So the fact that it happens, the story with Gardner and Nikki happens in the suburbs is largely irrelevant to what happens in it, except for, I guess, very near the end when they're trying to, hide bodies and hide the fact that there's all this violence happening right there, but nearly in front of other people. Other than that little bit, that could have been lifted and put anywhere. So it almost felt like their story and the story of Suburbicon were separate stories.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think that I noticed really you mentioned the intersections, and I think Nikki and I don't remember his name because again I don't think that was a problem is the family didn't get much time. They were very generically placed in the movie as black family.
Yes.
I think there was not a single line from the father that I could remember other than maybe in passing he was yelling in the house or I remember the mother having a lot of lines, but he didn't really have much.
He may have yelled in the house. He said almost nothing or maybe nothing.
Yeah, we see him at the end. He takes the flag off of the house, but beyond that, he doesn't really have a place. The mother gets her moments at the beginning of the movie, but also in the grocery store.
Yes,
she's very much the forefront of this family, at least in regards to their interactions with the neighborhood.
Right.
But I think that the intersections that we see between these two stories come between the two young boys.
Yes.
Nikki and the other
Andy, his name is.
And Andy, thank you. And so when we look at that, I think that's one of the important parts to at least perhaps from Clooney's perspective as he's doing this is to show the side by side the viewpoints of how they are happening at the same time. They don't necessarily have to intersect. But I think that you wanted them to intersect a little bit more.
Oh yeah.
I mean, spatially, they are neighbors. They're the backyards are connected, and the families. The mother even tells Nikki to go out and go play with him, and they put up the fences on the two sides of the house, but they don't put up a fence in the back. So that's allowing us to have that overlap. But again, I'm not sure what the point was to have both of these and not really give much weight to the Meyer family. I don't know. I think I may be missing something there. I think that it was important to include the family. I think you take that element out of it again, and doesn't matter that it's in the 1950s. It could just be, set in Minnesota, or here we go, Fargo 2, or whatever it may be. So yeah, I think it's an interesting inclusion, and I kind of wish we would have gotten a little bit more in it. I mean, let's talk about the Meyer family and their story a little bit. What did you make of the portrayal of whites against them? We see it a couple times in the grocery store. We see it in the town hall meeting, and we see it throughout as people are stationed around and outside their homes. So what did you think about that?
So I thought that was one of the only places where I didn't enjoy the tone shifts. So I really enjoy the tone shifts in your typical Coen film where, again, we've talked about this, where they can go from like horrific violence to making you laugh. I'm a big fan of that. However, with this, I feel like they weren't able to make an effective commentary because at first, the very first scenes were largely comical. The very opening scene with the mailman and everyone sort of looking at this black family that had just moved in and whispering to each other, and the one person even backing their car into a light post because they were clearly looking at the family instead of looking where they were going. it's played for comedy.
Yes.
And then they play the town hall meeting for comedy too, as these people are saying wildly, obviously illogical things,
Mm-hmm.
where they are, it's unironic, but in terms of their perspective, but it's very funny. We're laughing at how bigoted and stupid these people are, but then it gets really intense and dark. And so it's like, are we supposed to be sort of mocking these people, or are we supposed to be angry at them?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess obviously the answer is both, but it felt like they couldn't make an effective commentary on race that made me angry at the appropriate points, and wanting to make sure that I'm constantly educated about these issues, because they're also just making it like these people are buffoons and we should be laughing at them.
I think they try, but I agree. I think that in the town hall meeting, you have one of the members of the board who says that he was one of the people who allowed this family to come in,
Yes.
and he's rolling his eyes as these people are chanting and arguing and yelling, and he sees the absurdity of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we could side with him and see this absurd nature of the white culture Suburbicon citizen. But I think at the same time, we don't ever see the negative side to it. The police are trying to hold back these people from going onto the Meyer family home and destroying, but they fail.
Mm-hmm.
They fail pretty horribly as the car gets blown up and their windows get smashed in,
Mm-hmm.
and a Confederate flag gets laid on their house. And although the family is not harmed, we see that the purpose of them being there, these white supremacists or just these racists are there, and they are standing there in the morning and they're talking to news reporters about
Mm-hmm.
this family is a horrible family, and they're never punished for it.
Right.
In fact, I don't know if anybody in this movie actually is punished through any means other than death.
Right. Yes. Any legal means.
Yeah, we do see a lot of people see consequences to their actions, but it's kind of by their own doing.
Yes.
So let's talk about those consequences. Like we get a ton of different deaths in here. Which was your favorite death?
Oh, wow. I mean, there's some really amazing ones. Most of them are pretty widely telegraphed, but they do it again for comedy. The death of the insurance investigator is very, I mean, you see it coming so far in advance, but they don't care. They want you to. And they even tease you multiple times with him, like, sort of about to drink the coffee, but not quite. So that was entertaining. I think that the one that I enjoyed the most has to be the final one, Gardner's, because it's just, I mean, when you realize what's going to happen, regardless of whether you realize it as he's picking up the sandwich or even just as they show them sitting at the table, it's just so slow played. And the whole time he's giving this huge, brilliant speech where he's just chewing the scenery. You can't even listen to what he's saying because you're laughing the entire time because it's just so appropriate.
I was waiting for him just to be mid-sentence and his head just to drop. I didn't know how the medicine was going to affect him.
Right.
Well, to give you guys, to give you a little bit of insight into this, the wife, Margaret, makes a sandwich with some sort of medicine that she crushes up into a powder and puts it into a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a glass of milk. And Damon's character at the end of the movie is playing this hard-nosed father, giving his son an option of going along with the story or he's going to kill him. And it's a little bit of misdirection because it's been some time since this sandwich is there.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I think you caught it way before I did because you were laughing in as that scene shows the
I laughed
the
as soon as they showed the table.
Yeah. And I'm like, what is he laughing at? And as soon as they showed the close-up of Damon and I see the sandwich and the glass of milk, I'm like, okay, all right, yep. They telegraph almost every single death. The only ones that you don't see coming are the two of the burglars, specifically the bigger one in the car.
Oh, yes.
That one caught me off guard. I thought he was going to die. Did not expect the way in which he died to be the side swiping by the fire truck. That one caught me. But yeah, I think that my favorite was Oscar Isaac's death, just because I I was so pleased when he came into the movie. He was my favorite character just because he's phenomenal in everything he does. I don't think I've seen a movie where I didn't enjoy, his acting. But really what it comes down to is, like you said, we knew it was going to happen. Mm-hmm. There were 3 or 4 moments where we saw, he's going to, and they're the comedic aspect of, he's going to drink the coffee. Oh, he's not going to drink it. And then he takes a sip, and we almost don't even see him take the sip because it's so quick. Mm-hmm. After the buildup of, he's going to drink it, he's not. He's going to drink it, he's not. And then he drinks it without us really even noticing. And I thought it was just funny. I think, again, and then on top of that, getting hit in the head with the tire iron, and then it getting stuck in his head, and Damon trying to pull it out. And again, like you said earlier, the very gruesome aspect that could be seen in, like, if a horror movie or a war movie is something very disturbing. The theater was in tears from laughing hard at that moment. So, yeah, again, plenty of Coen deaths throughout the movie. You do expect to see some gruesome aspects of it. So, and we absolutely do. Yeah, we do.
It's interesting because if you look, and this is another thing where maybe they weren't. It feels like the movie was trying to do multiple things in terms of what it was trying to be. You have the death of nearly every single character in the film, every significant character that's not one of the kids. Mm-hmm. They all die. And it's interesting because they're all dying, but then you have the law enforcement is portrayed, competent, pretty competent, and they're not corrupt. They're not the bad guys, but so many other people in this film are corrupt, and it feels like maybe it wanted to also sort of be about that, like just about human nature. Even like you think that the insurance investigator is going to come in and be one of, like, your hero, right? Mm-hmm. Because at this point you realize every single person in the film who's not a kid is also a bad guy.
Yeah.
And then he comes in and you're thinking, oh, okay, we now have a hero. This is the person who's going to expose what's going on, and they're going to need to kind of try to stop him. But no, he's just another villain.
Mm-hmm. Just as corrupt as everybody else.
Exactly. And so it feels like they kind of wanted to say something about human nature or morality or something, and it didn't. I don't know. Maybe that got lost in movie B.
Yeah, and I think that, like you had said, to comment on the police officers, you have the lead investigator, the chief of police, one of the guys who's doing his job very well, and he comes to Gardner at one point asking him, do you know anything about this? Mm-hmm. Like, he's doing his job, and he's catching it. We know that at one point he's uncomfortable with the answer, but he's like, all right, well, if that's what you say, you don't know this guy, then I'm assuming that you're telling the truth, and he walks out. That's the last time we see him in the movie.
Yeah.
He's not brought back again. And I think that, as we had said earlier, the police officers are protecting this family. They are not turning on the black family as well. And mm-hmm. So we do get a very strong view of police enforcement. And in a movie like this, you expect the opposite. But they're portrayed very well. Mm-hmm. But there is no finality to their story.
Right.
The night ends, and they're not there to help clean up. They're nowhere to be seen. You have a family, the Meyer family, picking up the mess, and you have reporters talking about it, and that's it. I don't even think that we have any report of no, we don't, because the movie ends with the boy playing ball with his friend. It has nothing. Mm-hmm. There's a house full of dead people, and police officers are nowhere to be seen. So, yeah, it may have just been simply lost in movie B, as you said. The Suburbicon aspect of it overshadows. Well, the Lodge family mm-hmm. overshadows the Meyer family's story, which I think it should have. But I think as an audience member, we didn't necessarily want either to overshadow either. We wanted to see them work together somehow by the end.
Yeah, I kept waiting the entire time until the very last shot, and then it went to black for the two movies to coincide and require each other. And at no point did either require the other one. So then you just kind of wonder why they're both there. Because they're both interesting. I would have seen either of these films. Mm-hmm. But together, yeah, I don't really know that they made each other necessary to their own stories.
It was a little disheartening by the end to see that they didn't come together. like you said, the fact that they didn't doesn't make this movie or either storyline worse. It just doesn't make it as complete as it could have been.
Right.
So let's take a short little break here. Let's all go to the lobby and grab some refreshments and see what is coming up next from Eventide.
You know, there's nothing quite as satisfying as a good conversation with intelligent company. Join comedian Don Smith every week as he sits down and talks with comedians, actors, filmmakers, writers, and everyday schmoes. It's The Life with Don Smith, Wednesdays at noon on 106.9 FM, and now available on the Eventide Entertainment podcast feed every Friday on Spreaker, YouTube, and iTunes. What's up at Wiley's? Hey guys, it's Mike, and it's time to let everyone know what's up at Wiley's this week, brought to you by Wiley's Comedy Club here in Dayton, Ohio. This weekend, Tim Bedore will be headlining shows on Friday and Saturday, pulling a special triple header for your opening weekend in November. Friday, November 3rd, Tim will be performing at 8 o'clock p.m., and then again on Saturday at 7:15 and 9:30 p.m. Tickets are $10 each per show. And of course, on Sunday, it's the legendary Wiley's Sunday Comic Show. It's the very best in local comedy from everyone here in the Dayton and Gem City area. Tickets to that show are $5, and the show starts at 8 o'clock p.m. That's all that's going on at Wiley's this weekend. For more information, go to wileyscomedy.com for tickets, discounts, and all kinds of other information. And now, on with the show.
All right, welcome back. So we just got done talking about these two movies and whether they coincided and whether they didn't. I think overall we enjoyed the film. But Chris, something you bring to the table that I really want to dive into is the visual aspect, the writing element of it. And so what did you think of the film as it was written, as it was shot, from not just a viewer as somebody who enjoys movies, but somebody who would study them? How did you think that it played out?
I think that the dialogue was very strong. It used silence really, really well, which you need to be a strong director of performers to be able to do that, because they had to emote so much of this movie with just their expressions. Nikki had almost no lines. I was laughing because as I realized about, some way into the film that he's basically the protagonist. And then I thought, I wonder what his audition was like. Did he just sit there and make some faces? Because he says almost nothing the entire film. I imagine in general the script was a very short script.
Yeah. Because
it had so little dialogue. But through all of that, the dialogue itself was very strong, and the performances sort of emoting the unspoken dialogue were very strong. And I think that's where it helps when you have someone directing people that they know, like Clooney obviously has worked with Matt Damon many times. And you get a lot out of Damon just from his expressions. And same with Julianne Moore. Mm-hmm. So you get a lot from that. That, I think, was the strongest part for me, is actually the use of silence and making the little bit of dialogue that was there really count. So we kind of talked about like the narrative itself. So in terms of the narrative writing, I wasn't as keen on the way that it tried to split its attention. Mm-hmm. But I think that the character writing was really strong. I think that they had great character insights as well. They're very realistic as you start to look at the ways in which these people are behaving. They're behaving in very human ways.
Yeah, Matt Damon's character, Gardner Lodge, is somebody who is very corrupt and a bad guy, but there are times where you don't see him as a caricature of evil. You see him as somebody who made a decision with their life, a decision that he intended for it to pan out, a criminal decision that he expected to pan out in a certain way, but once things start to go south for him, he sees them very naturally. He comes in after Isaac's character dies, and he says, "That's it. We're done. It's not going to happen this way anymore." Mm-hmm. And the scene in which he's talking to Nikki, he speaks with Nikki about going to boarding school. You can think of characters and real people actually that would have these very emotionless conversations with their sons and daughters if they are portrayed that way. It's very, very real.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think Gardner was one of the most fascinating characters for me because one thing that I got out of that character is all the interactions he had with Nikki, which honestly he didn't have that many interactions with Nikki. But when he did, he'd often try to portray this authoritarian, like, do as I say, knock on my door, you're dismissed kind of dad. He so wasn't that guy, though. And he was such just a nerd. And you know that he was just a nerd his whole life. And it's beautiful because he's trying to be the tough dad that he knows is sort of what dads are supposed to be, especially that time period. Dads are supposed to be that tough authoritarian dad. But he's just not that guy. And so he plays it in such a beautiful way that he's trying so hard, but you know that he's never spanked his child, and he's not that dad. So it's all a show, and everything about his life, is such a show. Like he's not that dad, but he doesn't even care about his kid.
Yeah.
And that I think is really fascinating to me. A really great character study.
Yeah, and I think that you see that especially in his interactions with the goons. They come in and he takes a very strong backseat and he tries to calm the situation and doesn't see the gravity of what is happening, and he gets punched in the face, and he's taken aback. He doesn't expect that to be there. If he was really the tough guy he says he would be and he acted to be, he would stand up more physically to these goons as he does to his son. And you don't see that. There's no evidence of that anywhere other than in his interactions, the few that they may be with Nikki.
Yeah, absolutely. He's so spineless. Like even when he threatens, I think his Bud is Oscar Isaac's character.
Yes.
But even when he threatens him before he drinks the coffee, it's such an empty threat.
Yeah.
And Bud also realizes that and just jumps on it. Like it's such an empty threat. He's so pathetic. And it's only when he realizes that if he doesn't do something, they're all sunk, that he chases him, it chases him down and hits him. But even then, he wouldn't have killed him if he hadn't already basically been dying.
Well, and I think it's interesting, as we talk about this, I don't think Matt Damon's character, Gardner, doesn't actually kill anybody. I guess you could say that Oscar Isaac's character, he finishes the job, but it's Margaret who actually poisons him. It is the two goons that end up killing his wife Rose.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He doesn't kill either of the goons. One is killed by Uncle Mitch, and the other is killed by the fire truck. So he doesn't actually physically do anything other than finish the one job and try to keep the pieces together of this whole situation scenario that he's played out.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So I think that's pretty cool of them to piece together the storyline of somebody who seems to be in charge of it all, who's really just reacting to everything as opposed to being proactive and causing really anything. He is just very reactive in nature.
Absolutely, yeah. It's that sort of Coen thing of a very normal, average person getting mixed up in something so big and horrible, and having kind of no idea where that's really going to go.
We just talked about Oscar Isaac's character, and to me that this falls into this category. But we do this every week, and I'm curious as to who you specifically would place here. What's a character that you wish had more screen time or more storyline? A character that you wanted to see more of that you didn't get to?
I think that the obvious answer would be the Meyer family, because if they had had more involvement in the story, maybe their story would have made sense.
Yeah.
But other than that, I would say it was probably Oscar Isaac, because I agree with you that in everything he's in, he's magnetic.
Yeah.
And as soon as he walked into that scene, the whole movie just jumped up for me in terms of quality. So I honestly could have had him in every scene, just like standing there talking.
Yeah, I was bummed that he only got his 2 scenes, but in both scenes, he like you said, he lifts the story. He gives you that shot in the arm of somebody new, somebody who is not dealing with all of the bullshit of this family. He sees right through it, and he says, here's how it is, and I see this every single day, and the red flags of insurance fraud that he talks about, he does it in a really funny way. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely loved his 2 scenes. I think that on top of him, I may say Uncle Mitch, just because Uncle Mitch was, honestly, he was kind of a jerk, but he was really the only person outside of perhaps Nikki who was just true and just a genuine, he cared about family. He was what the other side of 50s society that really wasn't portrayed very much in this film. That family was very dysfunctional, but Uncle Mitch was very intent on keeping Nikki safe, and even his teasing of Nikki was done so in a way in which we all have a family member who maybe teased us a little bit, but you would lay down, their life in some cases to protect you. And so Mitch was he was a fun character. He didn't excite me, but I enjoyed his the genuine behavior that he portrayed.
Yeah, I loved it because they made him so just kind of like, oh, he's that obnoxious uncle for so much of the movie, yet he's kind of one of the heroes.
Yeah.
And it's a very Coen thing to kind of disrupt your expectations, where you expect him to be annoying, and then he's one of the only people that you actually want to succeed.
Well, talk about an unseen death. I think that was one of the biggest the biggest spins that they put on it, is that you could tell that he had gotten roughed up in this tussle with the goon, one of the two burglars, but there was nothing that I saw that showed me, oh, he's going to die from this fight. And when they have him turn around and you see the knife in his back, that did surprise me. There were not a whole lot of surprises in the film. As you said, they really telegraphed a lot of the endings, and they wanted the audience to react to that telegraphing. And this one, they didn't so much. So that was one of those that threw me off. What do you think as far as any unanswered questions? The movie ends without a whole lot of, like we said, consequence to either storyline outside of the deaths of each of these characters. What do you have, if you could sit down with the writers, what questions would you ask them about the ending?
Other than, like, again, how we keep talking about the Myers and like what they're even there for. I think that it would be some of the threads that are more designed to give the audience information about the plot than they are about what the scene is actually about. Like the scene you mentioned earlier with when the detective comes to talk to Gardner in his office. The purpose of that scene is to let the audience know that he needs the insurance money to pay off, some sort of mob gambling debt or whatever it happens to be, some kind of debt. That's the whole purpose of that scene. But when you write a scene, it should do more than just give exposition to the audience. It should have other purposes. And especially considering that's the last appearance of the detective in the film, I kind of want to know why that had to happen that way. Like, why did you even need that? Couldn't we have found it out in a much faster and simpler way that he had this debt, if that's the only purpose of that scene? Why couldn't we make these things matter more in some way?
Yeah, and I agree. I think that there were so many different elements of obvious thematic pursuit. At the same time, there were so many scenes that really didn't give us any thematic description at all, and it was, like you said, just exposition. And what is the purpose of this? We definitely see so much of that as far as the Lodge family storyline. There's the obvious answer of, okay, our theme is that white people get away with all of these crimes, but a black family can't even just go to the grocery store and live their life without being under this microscope.
Right.
But we have so many different situations where we are unsure of what the purpose behind the writing actually meant as far as the Lodge family. One that really jumped out to me is they never at any point discuss the fact that Rose and Margaret are twins, or at least if they're not twins, they are almost identical in the fact that they are played by the same character, and the only difference is their hair color. I felt like, okay, well, they're twins. Okay, are they twins? I actually thought that Rose was the mother of the whole family. Because of the age difference, I did not see I thought that Gardner was the son of Rose. And in fact, they were married. And I didn't get that until even after the chloroform scene. And I don't know if that was just me, but if there was a line that I missed, but I just felt like there was a lot of uncertainty as far as character development early on, whereas it started to flow pretty quickly after the hospital scene where we see the aftermath of this burglary.
Right.
But it was before that where I was pretty confused. I just wasn't quite sure what was going on as far as the interactions between some of the characters.
Yeah, I can very much see that.
So, okay, we're getting closer to the end here. What are your final thoughts on Suburbicon?
Overall, I did think it was a worthwhile film. I think it was an entertaining film. It definitely didn't hit every mark that it set out to hit, and I kind of wish I knew what some of those marks were that it was trying to hit so that I could better contextualize what was happening. But overall, it was entertaining. I laughed at the parts that were funny. I laughed a lot. So I got something out of it. I did enjoy that. And I haven't seen a good dark comedy in a while that actually pulled it off and didn't go too funny or too dark, but walked the line pretty well. So overall, I did find it to be a very entertaining film, even if it did have some narrative issues.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I did enjoy it. I look back on it, and we saw it a couple days ago, and so that gave me some time to kind of sift through and see, what, not my initial gut reaction. My gut reaction was that it was a really well done movie. I didn't walk out dissatisfied. I didn't feel like the plot holes or the questions detracted away from my enjoyment of it. And I have to say, I went in not having seen a single trailer, but knew that it was set in 1950s suburbia.
Yes.
So I think that played into it, is that my expectations were neither high nor low going into it. Like you, I laughed at a lot of those moments that they portrayed satirically. I was a bit disturbed at some, and I think that they wanted that reaction out of us. And so, yeah, I agree. I think it was well done. Is it going to win an Oscar here in a few months? No. It may get some, just because of the amount of nominations that come around. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw something from the film get nominated, but I don't think you're going to see any major categories. I don't think you're going to see too much of Suburbicon represented in Oscar season.
Probably not, no.
All right, so if we have a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being horrible, you almost walked out, to 5 being amazing, you want to see it again and again, and buying the DVD and Blu-ray and everything in between. Where would you place this one?
I'd say probably a 4 out of 5. I think it's very entertaining. I don't know that I need to see it again, but I did enjoy watching through it. I wish it could have been better with certain aspects, but I think it was an entertaining film. Not upset that I paid for it at all. Yeah,
no, I agree. I gave it a 3.5, but I think that it would not be too hard for me to. I would not be hard pressed to give it a 4 if that came down to it, and just simply because I think that for me the 1.5 missing really stems from the disconnect between the two storylines.
Absolutely.
I think that both storylines, like we discussed, were really well done, but the fact that they never really overlapped, and where they did overlap was almost just by happenstance, as opposed to actually giving us a meaty overlap. That I think that it could have been done a little better, but I enjoyed it. I think that anybody who has seen a Coen Brothers film and has enjoyed that film, you would enjoy Suburbicon. I know that I think I've discussed with some of my students saying, hey, if you've seen this or this, and then you need to go check it out, which I was pretty disappointed to find out that the movies I named off, they'd never even heard of.
Oh, no.
So that was a little disturbing. No, one had seen Fargo, so I'll give that guy credit. But yeah, so an overall 7.5 out of 10 between Chris and I. Pretty high on Suburbicon. So go out and check that out. It is going to be out probably for another few weeks. We have a lot of really big movies coming up. So if you plan on going to see Suburbicon, don't wait too long. Otherwise, you may be delegated to a single option on a Sunday afternoon.
That's true.
Speaking of what's coming up next, we do have Thor Ragnarok coming out next week. We will be looking at, well, actually, that one comes out tomorrow, but we will be reviewing it next week. we will be looking at that, and trust me, this one is going to be one you were not going to want to miss, as I am a huge Marvel fan, and I've heard some really, really good things about this. Rotten Tomatoes has already said that this is one of the highest rated Marvel movies to date, so I'm very excited for that. Chris, before we let you go, if people wanted to get more information from you, actually, everybody, I know Chris from my work with Unwritten, and so if you get some free airtime to plug Unwritten, you guys are in the middle of your seasons, where can they find some information on that podcast?
Yeah, so Unwritten is the audio drama that I write, direct, and produce, and you can find more information about it at unwrittenpodcast.com. We are in the middle of our second season right now, and we just a week and a half ago released our big musical episode, which is a really big deal for us. So if you're interested, unwrittenpodcast.com, you can check it out there.
Yeah, and actually, Don Smith, who is also part of the Eventide family, is one of the characters in season 2.
Yes, he is.
So if you guys have been listening to The Life with Don Smith and you want to see him in a different light, go ahead, check out Unwritten Podcast. You will not be disappointed. So, all right, so there you have it. There's our 2 cents on Suburbicon. Until next time, everybody, drive home safe, and we'll talk to you next time.